Such a straightforward and seemingly simple question, but an incredibly complex one to answer correctly. Based on 25 years of studying alcoholics, alcoholism, and addiction in general, I've come to believe there are 5 underlying factors most likely contribute to one becoming dependent. 1. Heritage. American Indians, Cherokee in particular, are at an exponentially greater risk of becoming an alcoholic than someone from, say, South America. Not far behind are those with Irish, Scottish blood and Eastern European after that. 2. Genetics. Is there a history of alcoholism in the family? If so, which side of the family, and how prevalent was it? Answers to each of these can then literally be turned into an expected outcome, around 67% likelihood of becoming alcoholic for the person in question. 3. Formative years. What sort of attachment did the person form with his primary caregiver, usual mom, in the first 2 years of life? If none or very little attachment is the answer, that person can live with a sense of emptiness well into their adult life, and invariably will turn to something outside of themselves to fill the hole. 4. Trauma. Is this person a trauma survivor? That could be anything from neglect as a child to something much more acute like being sexually assaulted or experiencing war. Go to the local VA and check out what the rate of drug and alcohol abuse is. It is staggering. In my opinion, alcoholism is oftentimes a byproduct of one trying to medicate other underlying conditions such as depression, self-esteem problems, and anxiety. The fact that alcohol will for a period of time provide a very effective way to ease the pain associated with the conditions above is why so many fall prey to the deadly trap. For the record, I have zero problems with people who like to drink or even those who like to get drunk. I sure as heck did. I have an enormous empathy, though, for those that have various pre-existing risk factors, and then soothe their pain with alcohol only to wind up as hopeless alcoholics. I am not a doctor, nor am I a preacher. I am, however, 15 years sober from alcohol. I took my first drink at age 10, and by age 22 was drinking 24 hours a day. Every day. I found my way to treatment in October of 1997, and have remained free of alcohol ever since. My own largely wasted adolescence and extreme compassion for all that suffer from addiction have driven me to read and learn as much about the subject as possible. My hope is that one day I will have something meaningful to contribute to the cause of minimizing the devastating role addiction plays in millions and millions of families across the globe. I personally have had several close friends that I met in rehab and through AA relapse and who are now dead. I've seen countless others lose everything they care deeply about because they could not find an answer for their addiction. A harmless drink for many is a death sentence for an unfortunate few. The short answer is that what makes you an alcoholic is not how much you drink, but what you drink. While alcohol is associated with partying and fun, as a drug it's quite the contrary, as it's actually a depressor. I like to picture it like a chemical dissolvent used to take away old paint from furniture, taking away layers of paint and, eventually, getting to the wood. In that analogy, layers of paint would be layers of thoughts, and the wood would be our body. The first question is, what is that are you depressing? Drinking at a party is about taking away some superficial layers of thought, the old and damaged paint, which is good, and those would be your moral repression, or forgetting about some superficial facts so shyness won't affect you as much. Then you can have fun in the party way, which is mainly about crossing social boundaries. But when your motive to drink is not to have fun, but to become numb, you've got to go as deeper as your tolerance to alcohol has grown to. At first it only takes a beer a day, and then you make it 2, 3, and eventually to become numb you need half a bottle of high graduation alcohol. In the metaphor, you're already damaging the wood. Following that metaphor, that's also why some alcoholics become violent midways, because in that delayering they eventually get to the point of depressing the respect for the other and they stop repressing that desired and natural violence within themselves. But again, as you point out, you can get to that point of drinking a lot of every day and not be an alcoholic. That's because sometimes the pain you're trying to depress is going to be a temporal thing, a period of your life, maybe a breakup or losing a job. But when that pain is permanent, when you need to escape reality permanently, sometimes because you have some life boundaries and you know there's no other escape, is when you succumb to it. Even if it's the slightest thing, like having something in your life that irritates you. If you're not tolerant enough to cope with it, you're gonna seek a way to depress that feeling. And the legal and cheap way to do it is alcohol. If our bodies didn't create tolerance so easy, it'd be a perfect drug. Since taking a beer or a glass of wine a day feels good at first, and doesn't damage your body, which in the analogy would be when you get to the point of having dissolved all the paint and you start damaging the wood. Finally, genetics. Adopted behaviors and types of personality are the factors that will contribute to having that predisposition of having that permanent pain and also learning to cope with it with drugs. In this case, alcohol. That's why sometimes it's a family thing, because if you've grown to be a similar way to someone in your family, and you've also stayed in the same cultural or environmental background, you'll eventually find yourself in the same situation which brought that family member to become an alcoholic back on its day. It's a story repeating itself, not so much because of genetics, but because of getting to the same stage set. In your case, if your life itself has nothing to do with the life of your father, then maybe you inherited the same genetical predisposition, but you have lived another kind of life that hasn't got yourself into the situation that would trigger the addiction. Some of us just have that predisposition to be drug addicts. I think studies say about 20% of the population has it. Yet if we're not exposed to the situation and the drug at the right moment, we won't learn to use that drug to cope with that situation. That's applicable to almost every other drug.